He stood at the altar, his posture impeccable in his custom Armani tuxedo. Richard Blackwood, billionaire tech mogul, philanthropist, and supposedly blind since the accident 3 years ago. The church buzzed with anticipation, filled with new, York's elite and multiple celebrities who had flown in just for this occasion. The wedding of the decade, they called it. Society's pages couldn't get enough of the romance between the blind tycoon and Victoria Wellington, daughter of Senator Wellington, her face plastered across magazines as the beautiful bride who had allegedly healed his broken heart. What the guests didn't know, what almost no one knew, was that Victoria had fled the country the night before. Cold feet, some would later say. A crisis of conscience, others would whisper, but only her sister, Olivia, knew the truth. Just a stall. Them. Victoria had sobbed over the phone from an undisclosed location in the Cayman Islands. Tell them I have food poisoning. Tell them anything. I can't marry him, Liv. I just can't. The string quartet began the wedding march. The immaculately decorated cathedral fell silent as all eyes turned toward the entrance. Olivia hesitated in the shadows, her heart pounding against her chest. Victoria's wedding dress felt strange on her body, slightly too long, slightly too tight around the waist. The veil obscured her face as she'd meticulously applied makeup to resemble her sister more closely. The sisters were similar enough in appearance, both tall, blonde with the same high cheekbones, but anyone who knew them well could tell them apart in an instant. But Richard was blind. That was the only reason this desperate plan might work. Just get through the ceremony, Olivia whispered to herself, clutching the bouquet of white peonies so tightly her knuckles turned white. Then create some distraction and disappear before the reception. Buy Victoria some time. The weight of hundreds of stairs pressed against her as she began her slow march down the aisle. Richard's best man whispered something in his ear, presumably describing the bride's approach. Richard's face remained stoic, handsome features betraying no emotion beneath his dark designer sunglasses. Olivia had always thought it strange, the way Richard insisted on wearing sunglasses despite his blindness. For others' comfort, he'd explained once at a family dinner. People find it unsettling to look into unseeing eyes. The explanation made sense, but something about it had never sat right with her. As she approached the altar, her steps faltering slightly, she noticed Richard's head tilting almost imperceptibly toward her. A curious little movement, as if he were listening intently, trying to pick up some detail. "Who gives this woman?" the minister asked. Senator Wellington, standing beside her, squeezed her arm. Did he suspect? She couldn't tell. "Her mother and I do," he said, voice strong and clear, before kissing what he believed to be Victoria's cheek through the veil and placing her hand in Richard's. Richard's fingers closed around hers. His touch was surprisingly gentle, yet commanding. Confidence exuded from his every movement, a man accustomed to controlling his surroundings despite his disability. Up close now, she could smell his cologne, something expensive and subtle, with notes of sandalwood and bergamot. "Dearly beloved," the minister began, but Olivia barely heard the words. Her entire focus narrowed to Richard's face. Had his jaw tightened slightly when he took her hand? Was that a twitch at the corner of his mouth? When the time came to lift her veil, Olivia held her breath. This was the moment she'd dreaded most. Richard's hands moved with practiced precision, lifting the delicate lace to reveal her face. For a split second, so brief she almost thought she'd imagined it, his expression changed. His eyes, hidden behind those dark glasses, seemed to lock directly onto hers. And in that moment, Olivia knew. She knew with bone-chilling certainty. Richard could see her. He could see everything. The ceremony continued like a bizarre dream, Olivia robotically repeating vows she didn't mean to a man who was clearly not blind. Her mind raced through implications, through possibilities. If Richard could see, why the elaborate deception? And more urgently, did he recognize that she wasn't Victoria? His thumb ran across her knuckles as he slid the enormous diamond ring onto her finger, a deliberate caress that sent shivers down her spine. Not the loving touch of a husband to his new wife, but something possessive, almost threatening. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the minister announced. "You may kiss the bride." Richard's hands cupped her face, tilting it upward. He leaned in close, lips brushing against her ear first. "Hello, Olivia," he whispered, his voice soft enough that no one else could hear. Then he pressed his lips to hers in what appeared to the audience as a tender wedding kiss. The church erupted in applause, but Olivia felt as though she were drowning. He knew. He'd known all along. As he drew back from the kiss, a smile played at the corners of his mouth, predatory, victorious. "Smile, darling," he murmured, still for her ears only. "Everyone's watching." They processed down the aisle together, his grip on her arm vice-like, beneath the appearance of supportive guidance. Camera flashes blinded her, the congratulations of the crowd washing over her in a disorienting wave. She was trapped now, more thoroughly than she could have imagined when she agreed to her sister's desperate scheme. In the limousine, with the privacy screen raised between them and the driver, Richard finally removed his sunglasses. His eyes were a piercing blue, sharp with intelligence and completely, unmistakably functional. "I've wanted to meet you properly for a long time, Olivia," he said calmly, as though they were being introduced at a cocktail party rather than in the aftermath of a fraudulent wedding ceremony. "Victoria has told me so much about you." "Where is she?" Olivia demanded, her voice shaking despite her attempt to sound firm. "What did you do to her?" Richard laughed, a sound as pleasant as it was chilling. "I didn't do anything to her. Victoria is exactly where she chose to be, running from her responsibilities, as usual. The more interesting question is what you've done. Impersonating your sister at her own wedding? That's a bold move." "This isn't funny," Olivia hissed. "You've been lying to everyone. You're not blind." "And you're not Victoria," he countered smoothly. "It seems we both have our secrets." He poured 2 glasses of champagne from the limousine's bar, offering one to her. When she didn't take it, he set it down beside her. "You'll want that," he said. "We have a lot to discuss before the reception." "There won't be a reception," Olivia said firmly. "I'm ending this charade right now." Richard's smile never faltered. "No, you won't. Because if you do, your sister will face consequences far worse than a broken engagement." The coldness in his voice made her blood freeze. "What are you talking about?" "Victoria has been embezzling from my charitable foundation for almost a year," he said, taking a sip of his champagne. "Quite skillfully, I might add. I've been aware of it for months, waiting to see how far she'd go. The total is approaching 8 figures now. That's federal. Prison time, Olivia." Olivia stared at him in disbelief. Victoria had always been reckless with money, always in debt despite their family's wealth. But stealing? "I don't believe you." Richard reached into his jacket and pulled out a slim folder, handing it to her. Inside were bank statements, transfers, all meticulously documented. "Your father's political career would be over, of course," Richard continued conversationally. "Senator Wellington's daughter convicted of massive fraud? The press would have a field day. Your mother's charitable board positions, your family's standing in society, all gone." Olivia's hands trembled as she flipped through the damning evidence. She recognized Victoria's signature digital footprints. Her sister had always used the same password variants, the same account structures. "What do you want?" she whispered, already dreading the answer. "Originally, I wanted Victoria as my wife. The merger between my tech companies and your father's defense contracts would have been mutually beneficial. But now..." He studied her, his gaze analytical, as if she were a particularly interesting specimen under a microscope. "Now I find myself intrigued by the sister who would sacrifice herself to protect her family. That demonstrates character, Olivia. Loyalty, qualities I value far more than your sister's superficial charm. You expect me to stay married to you? This isn't even legal." "On the contrary, it's perfectly legal. You signed the marriage certificate as Victoria, yes, but that's a matter between you and your sister. As far as I'm concerned, I married a Wellington daughter, which was always the point." The limousine slowed as they approached the grand hotel where the reception was to be held. Through the tinted windows, Olivia could see photographers lined up, guests arriving in their finery. "We have about 30 seconds before those doors open," Richard said, his voice hardening. "Here's what's going to happen. You will smile. You will play the part of the adoring bride. You will maintain this charade for exactly 1 year. During that time, I will systematically erase the evidence of your sister's crimes. After the year is up, if you've played your part well, we can discuss an amicable divorce. If not—" He shrugged, the gesture eloquent in its simplicity. "Why?" Olivia demanded. "Why all this deception? The fake blindness? Why not just confront Victoria about the embezzlement?" For the first time, something like genuine emotion flickered across Richard's face. A darkness, a pain quickly masked. "Because, my dear," he said as the car came to a stop, "some games are worth playing for their own sake. Your sister took something precious from me long before she took my money. This is merely symmetry." He replaced his sunglasses, his features instantly transforming back into those of the vulnerable, blind billionaire the world thought they knew. The door beside them opened and camera flashes exploded around them. "Shall we?" he said, holding out his hand, his voice carrying just the right note of loving tenderness for their audience. Olivia took his hand, her mind racing through possibilities, through escape routes, finding none that didn't end in destruction for her family. 1 year. She could survive 1 year of this masquerade. As they entered the reception hall to thunderous applause, Richard's hand pressed against the small of her back, supportive to onlookers, a warning to her. "Just remember," he whispered in her ear, his breath warm against her skin. "I see everything, Olivia. Everything." The reception was a blur of faces, congratulations, champagne toasts, and first dances. Olivia moved through it like an automaton, her smile fixed, her responses rehearsed. All the while she watched Richard, the way he navigated the space with subtle cues from his environment rather than the more obvious assistive techniques a truly blind person might use. How had no one noticed before? The precision of his movements, the way his head turned toward visual stimuli just a fraction of a second too quickly. During their first dance, as he guided her flawlessly across the floor, she finally asked the question burning in her mind. "How did you know? That I wasn't Victoria?" His hand tightened slightly at her waist. "Victoria has a small scar on her left wrist. A childhood accident. You don't. But even if you had covered that, I would have known. You move differently. You smell different. Victoria bathes in that overpriced French perfume. You wear something subtler. And most importantly, Victoria would never have had the courage to go through with this deception. She runs from consequences. You face them head on." There was something like admiration in his voice that unsettled her even more than his threats. As the evening progressed, Olivia observed Richard working the room, charming, self-deprecating about his disability, graciously thanking guests for attending. He played his part flawlessly, occasionally returning to her side, his hand finding hers, putting on a convincing show of newlywed bliss. During a moment when they were relatively alone, Richard leaned close to her again. "Your father wants to speak with me privately after the reception. Business matters, he says. Should I tell him I know he's not really my father-in-law?" The casual threat sent ice through her veins. "Please, don't hurt my family." Something in her voice must have reached him, because his expression softened. Marginally, "I have no desire to hurt your family, Olivia. This arrangement can benefit all of us if you cooperate. And Victoria? Where is she really? Precisely where I said. hiding in the Cayman Islands, using the money she stole from me to finance her escape. She'll contact you soon enough, worried about the fallout. When she does, you'll tell her everything went smoothly, that I suspect. Nothing. That story buys both of you time. The complexity of his deception was staggering. How long had he been planning this? Had he somehow engineered Victoria's flight, knowing Olivia would step in to protect her? At the end of the night, they retired to the presidential suite under the knowing smiles and ribald jokes of their guests. Once alone, Richard immediately loosened his tie and poured himself a scotch, the performance dropping away. "The adjoining room is yours," he said, gesturing to a door. "I've had your things moved there." "My things?" Olivia asked, confused. "A complete wardrobe, toiletries, everything you'll need. We'll be leaving for our honeymoon tomorrow, a month in my villa in the south of France. Enough time for you to settle into your role before we return to real life." The casual way he had planned every detail left her reeling. "I can't just disappear for a month. I have a job, responsibilities." "Had," he corrected. "Your resignation from the museum was submitted last week. Victoria's idea, actually, though she had your career ending to become her full-time social coordinator, not my wife." He seemed amused by the irony. "You're enjoying this," she accused. "Parts of it," he admitted, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. "I enjoy competence, Olivia. I enjoy watching someone rise to impossible circumstances. Victoria would be having hysterics by now. You're looking for angles, assessing your options. It's refreshing. Don't pretend you know me." "But I do." He set down his glass and approached her, causing her to back up until she hit the wall. He placed his hands on either side of her head, caging her in without touching her. "I've been studying the Wellington family for years. Victoria was always the shiny object, beautiful, social, the perfect face for publicity campaigns. But you, the quiet curator with the brilliant mind who keeps the family secrets, you're far more valuable." His proximity was overwhelming, the heat of his body, the intensity of his gaze now that the sunglasses were gone. For a blind man, his eyes were remarkably expressive, flashing with intelligence, with something darker she couldn't name. "Our flight leaves at noon," he said, pushing away from the wall. "I suggest you get some rest. Tomorrow begins the rest of your life, Mrs. Blackwood." The door to her room closed behind him with a soft click, leaving Olivia alone with the enormity of what had just happened. She sank down onto the plush carpet, still wearing Victoria's wedding dress, and finally let the tears come. But even as she cried, her mind was working, analyzing. Richard Blackwood thought he had orchestrated the perfect trap, but he had made one critical mistake. He had underestimated her. If he had truly studied her as he claimed, he would know that Olivia Wellington had spent her life finding hidden truths, uncovering secrets in ancient artifacts. She had 1 year to discover what game Richard was really playing, and how to win it. As she finally rose and began the painstaking process of removing her sister's wedding dress, Olivia caught sight of herself in the mirror. Behind the carefully applied makeup to mimic Victoria's look, behind the tear streaks and the fear, she saw something ignite in her own eyes. Determination. Richard Blackwood wanted to play games? Fine, but he wasn't the only one who could see what others missed. And Olivia had always been very, very good at solving puzzles. On the other side of the door, Richard smiled as he listened to the whisper of expensive fabric hitting the floor. The first piece on the board had moved exactly as planned. Now it was time to see if Olivia Wellington was truly the worthy opponent he hoped she would be. The game had begun.